Welcome to the second Kumala Google Hangout, where once more we'll be tasting 3 fantastic Kumala wines. Joining us tonight is Kumala winemaker Ben Jordaan, who will be guiding us through the tasting. Say hello, Ben.
Hi, Rich.
And also joining him will be some special guests. So first we have Lil. Lil, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Lilinha, and I'm a blogger at Lilinha Angels World. And if you'd like to find the website, is www.lilinhaangel.com, and our hashtag on Twitter is Lilinha World.
Kumala Google Hangout, where once more we'll be tasting 3 fantastic Kumala wines. And great. Secondly, we have Lucy Loves. Hi, Lucy.
Hi Rich, my name is Lucy Curley. I have a fashion and lifestyle blog called Lucy Loves, and you can find that over at lucyloves.co.uk. And I'll also be tweeting this evening about the wine experience and asking a few questions from friends, family and followers.
Lovely. And last but not least, we have our resident wine expert, and introducing Mr. Peter May. Hello, Peter.
Hello, I think our wine expert is Ben. But I've been writing and blogging about wine, especially Pinotage, since 1997 on the web. And my particular interest is South African wine and Pinotage precisely because I wrote the first book about that great variety. And I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you very much, Peter. So expecting big things from you and testing questions for Ben, which is always good, what we like to see.
You have testing questions, or I can ask the questions which my followers have asked me to ask them.
That's great. That's what we want. We want some audience participation. So I'm looking forward to hearing their questions. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Mr. Ben Jordaan to introduce the wines for tonight and also give us a little heads up about Kumala. So Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, guys, and welcome to everybody that's logged into this Google Hangout. And we're doing the second one. The first one was pretty successful, so we're only going to go from strength to strength on this. We're going to go through 3 wines tonight. The first wine, if I can quickly take them through order, is going to be a Shiraz Pinotage Rose. The second one is going to be a Pinotage Shiraz, and the last one a Reserve Shiraz. Just a little bit about myself and Kumala. I've been the Kumala winemaker for the last 13 years. Kumala is currently producing about 3 million cases, of which about 95% of that is sold in the UK. If you take it on average, it's pretty much 3 bottles of Kumala being produced every minute. It's the #1 South African brand in the UK. It's also the fastest growing brand in the UK at the moment. I think Kumala is currently sitting at #3 in the UK. It's part of a group called Accolade Wines, which is an international group that's based in Australia, and we've got a number of other brands as well, which I'm not going to talk about tonight because it's all about Kumala. So if I can start with the first wine, I just want to make sure you all got the Shiraz Pinotage Rosé.
Mm-hmm.
This is a blend we haven't done before. Last year, 2013 was the first we rolled out this blend, and the reason we did it was a special request from the retailer that also we come up with a specific Pinotage-based blend. We've done a Pinotage, straight Pinotage Rosé blend before, but it was an interest to do a blend of the 2. And the idea was to really combine Pinotage, which is an iconic South African grape variety, with a New World grape variety like Shiraz, and come up with something that's really unique. Now, Pinotage is, even though it's a good dry red grape variety, as a rosé, it's probably the best-selling rosé from South Africa on its own. And what makes Pinotage so unique is if you pick it, because most of the Pinotages we pick for rosé are specifically selected blocks that we normally take, and these are picked at roughly about 23, 24 bulling. So we pick them fairly ripe, and that's to really get a lot of the red berry fruit that we're after. If you pick it too early, you tend to get a lot more tannins in the wine. So we've gone for Pinotage that gives you a lot of berries. The Shiraz we pick a little bit later, and Shiraz gives you nice kind of a dark spicy fruit that complements the Pinotage Rosé. So we can start with the first one. You guys are welcome to taste it.
I have a question. The
Yes,
bottle I've
Peter.
got is Shiraz. It just says Pinotage Rose, 2013.
Yeah, we're tasting a Shiraz Pinotage Rosé. Is what we're tasting. I just want to make sure everybody's got Shiraz Pinotage Rosé.
No, it just says Pinotage.
Mine says Pinotage.
Lucy, what does yours say?
Pinotage, this one.
Okay, good. Okay, so we have Pinotage. I just want to be clear, because my brief was for Shiraz Pinotage. Can we just grab the Pinotage? Just hang on.
Ben, is it a blend or is it 100%?
Okay, the one you're tasting, which you've got, is a Pinotage, 100% Pinotage.
Right.
We do use a little bit of Viognier in the blend as well. And the reason we use that is to really just help lift the aromatics on it.
Is that co-fermented?
Yes, it is. Does everybody know what that means?
No.
Okay, the question was, is the Pinotage and the Viognier co-fermented? And the answer is yes. And what that means is when you get in the grapes, there's two ways you can do a blend. You can either bring in the grapes and then you put them all together and you do the fermentation together, or you can finish the fermentation separately, and once you've got the wine, you'll blend the two wines. You'll blend the Pinotage and the Viognier. Any other questions on that? Any thoughts, any feedback, any...
How much would this bottle usually sell for, and where could people buy it?
This wine normally sells for $7.99, but it goes on promotion. So most of the time it's half price promotion that we do on it. So it's what we call a bog off, buy one get one free.
And one of my my followers, Claire, wanted to know if there are, what's the key difference between rosé and blush wines?
Rosé is normally, it's made from red grapes.
Yes.
So rosé needs to come from a red grape variety. Blush can be is normally, that's what we call the white, you get a white Zinfandel, that can be a blush. And we've started something new now as well, where we do a white Pinotage, which is also considered a blush. Now, the difference is that with rosé, you normally work with the color that you get from the grape skins. With a blush, you try and get as little color as possible. Yeah. You would normally try and take out some of that color as well to get a slightly clearer. It's a much brighter color. It's got less of a pink note to it. It's much clearer and closer to a white, as opposed to rosé that's normally got a pink color to it.
Sorry.
Okay, go.
Okay, sorry. One of my readers, you mentioned about deals, and they just ask here, I know Kumala wines are ready to drink when we buy them, but for instance, if I spot a great deal and decide to buy in bulk, what's the best way to store them? So when they buy one get one free, they might get, let's say, 5 bottles or more, or how can they store them, please? What's the best way?
The best way to store wine is normally to keep as cool as possible and as dark as possible. The darkest place you can find in your house. Now, I normally, if people got it, if you got a wine fridge, I would say put it in a wine fridge if you can. Otherwise, if you don't have that, just find the coolest, darkest place in your house. Now, these wines are they all got screw caps, so you can pretty much put them. You can have them standing upright. Yeah. They don't have to lie down, because they don't have a cork. Corks needs to lie down, because otherwise the cork dries out if it stands up, and then the wine stops. These screw caps, you can put them anywhere, stand up, lie down, whatever. But the rule is cool and dark.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And that applies to any wine?
Yes.
So one of my friends and followers, Tom Brown, said, why does, this is about his red wine, for instance, but he feels it always tastes nicer the longer that it's open. Is it to do with the airing, or is it the alcohol levels, or that affects that?
It's got all to do with the air, because your wine has got tannins in it. Tannins is what makes the wine. It gives it that grippy kind of dry taste. Now, if you expose the wine to air or to oxygen, that oxygen would normally bind with those tannins and basically just softens them out. So the longer you leave it open, the more that tannins bind with the oxygen, the wines become softer. But you got to be careful, because the longer you leave it open, the more tannins going to bind. It's going to get to a point where it's actually saturated, and then the wine goes from maturation into oxidation. So basically it turns into a porty wine, which is not very pleasant to drink, but good for cooking.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the Pinotage Rosé?
Yeah, it's got a beautiful colour, and it's quite light and quite refreshing. It's ice cold out the fridge. I've just taken it out of the fridge.
Yes.
Anybody want to guess what the residual sugar is on this rosé?
3.6.
3.6. I've got 3.6. Lucy?
Well, I wouldn't know. What's it out of? What's the scale? Me being a wine beginner.
Okay, you can. If it's, it can be anything up to 5 grams residual sugar and below is considered dry. 5 to 12 is considered medium sweet, and 12 and up, you're basically going into sweet wines.
I'm going to say about 4.
4.
I'll say no. I found them quite sweet. I'll say 6.7.
Liliana, you are basically 0.5 grams per liter off.
Well done.
Yeah, it's sitting at about 7.
Nearly.
Yeah, so 6.5.
Okay.
And there are a case of them.
So what was that, Peter?
I said send her a case of them as our prize.
Problem is, if I send her a case, she's probably going to store it in a cool bottle.
Actually.
Won't drink it.
Oh no. Not if you send me the rosé. The reds won't probably. But Rosanna, I love rosé wine, so.
Okay. Well, a case it is then.
So, Ben.
Mine is ice cold out the fridge, and I was expecting a sweet wine, and I know Pinotage has a sweet character about it, even when it's totally dry, and I was surprised how dry it tasted to me.
It's probably the reason I'm guessing why it tastes slightly dry for you is because of the alcohol.
It's only low, only 11%, isn't it?
The alcohol on this,
Yeah.
I would hope it's at least 12 or 12 and a half.
This is 11.5. This one.
11.5.
Okay, so let's say it's 12.
Well, that's what the label said.
Yeah, well, we can go up 0.5 up or 0.5 down. So let's go with 12.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's move on to wine number 2, Ben. So this is something a little bit different.
Okay, second wine is a Pinotage Shiraz. This is one of the longest standing blends that we've got in the Kumala range. And when Kumala started, we did 2 red blends. Well, actually, we did 3. We did a Cabernet Shiraz, we did a Pinotage Shiraz, and did a Pinotage Cinsault. So 2 of the mainstream blends that we started the brand with were both Pinotage driven. And for obvious reason, I mean, Pinotage is an iconic red grape variety that's been grown in South Africa since 1920s. But they've been only in the last 20 years they really perfected the art of making Pinotage a true red grape variety. We don't, and funny enough, in Kumala, we don't do a single varietal Pinotage yet. We do that more in our kind of premium ranges and a really good in our iconic range that we do Pinotage as a single variety. So to make it more consumer friendly, we had to go with the approach of introducing varieties like Shiraz, like Cinsault. We've even introduced Merlot into the blends. with Pinotage. And I think in total we're currently doing about 4 different Pinotage-based blends in the Kumala range, which is, as a whole, probably makes up a third of all the blends we do are Pinotage-driven blends. And again, for very obvious reasons. Pinotage, you get it early, you get it late, and you get it ripe, and you get it right, you get a very, very nice wine as a blending component. Pinotage gives you a lot of tannin. It can give you a lot of sweetness. It can give you a lot of dark intensity and fruit. So whatever you add to that is really going to just complement it and won't really pull it down. Pinotage can stand on its own, but we thought as a consumer-driven brand, Kumala had to introduce Kumala into blends. Mm-hmm. So the Pinotage Shiraz is a 50-50 blend that we do between the two. We normally play around with oak on the Pinotage as well. And over the years, there's been a lot of different types of oak that you can use. And in the Kumala range, we use predominantly oak chips and oak staves. In this particular blend, we used oak chips, and you get various types of toasting that you can do in oak chips as well. And this particular blend, we used what's called a mocha toasting. So what that means is basically that the oak chips is toasted in such a way that when you use it on your wine, it enhances any mocha flavors in that wine. So we've gone with what we call a mocha chip that we put in about 30% of the blend, and we make what's called a oak bomb, if you want to call it that. And that basically is a super concentrated Pinotage oaking component that we then proportionally back blend. And we kind of find a sweet spot. We start off with 10%, 15%, 20%, and we can go up to 40% of the blend, depending on how much oak we want to get in the wine and what kind of mouthfeel we want to get out of it. So that's kind of the background on the blend. Have you guys tasted it?
Yeah.
Comments, questions?
I've never had Pinotage before, and I think we've had a question. And when you have wine, you always have kind of cheese and meat. Is there any kind of other veggie options that you would pair with Pinotage Shiraz?
Any other vegetarian
options?
That's a good question. I normally go with color. So if you're going to go veggies, I would go beetroot.
Yeah.
Any cooked beetroot would be probably a very good combination with Pinotage.
Sounds good.
Peter doesn't like beetroot.
My wife loves beetroot. I have no problem with having non-meat dishes with red wine. Ratatouille, brilliant. Pasta with a tomato sauce, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Beetroot, though, is too earthy for me.
That's exactly why you got to go Pinotage with beetroot. For the exact thing you said now, because of that earthiness.
I don't get earthy from Pinotage. I get sweet. I get berry. I don't get earth.
Yeah, it's quite berry.
You need to come and taste some old vintage Pinotage in South Africa.
I've tasted old vintage Pinotage. I get forest floor, mushroom. I still don't. It would still take a lot more than that to get me to drink to eat beetroot.
I like beetroot. It's fine.
I hate the way it colours everything on the plate. It stains everything on the plate.
So, Ben, is
why don't you say on the? I'm sorry. I keep quiet. Sorry. I was going to say, why don't you say on the label what the blend is? When I looked at the label of the wine I tasted, I drank with dinner. It says Pinotage Shiraz. I had no idea what the blend was.
You mean the blend proportion or what?
The proportion. You just told us it's 50-50. It doesn't say that on the label.
No.
There's very little information on the label at all.
Yeah. That information we normally leave for our more premium brands. The entry-level wines are it's almost like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola will give you the real basics of
Coca-Cola lists all its ingredients. Only one you list is sulfites. If you look at the Coca-Cola label, it labels all the ingredients in it.
Yeah, but if I tell people all the ingredients in the wine, they probably won't drink it.
No, but
Actually,
you could say the proportion of the grapes.
Liliana?
yeah, sorry, I have a quick question. One of my readers is asking, so are they suitable for vegetarians, the wines, Kumala wines?
Good question.
The question is the wine vegan or vegetarian friendly? Is that the question?
Yes.
The answer to that would be no, because in some of the red wines we use gelatin, and we also occasionally would use some isinglass as well, and both of those would be an animal derived. So the answer is no, unfortunately.
Okay. That's like, I'm not vegetarian. I'll tell them. Thank you.
Sure.
While you're talking about ingredients, I've got a question from Mary about
anyone have any more questions about the Pinotage? Oh, I think Peter's trying to say something. Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, while we were talking about additives, although I don't think what you said were actually in the wine, but one of my group asked about sulfites. Could you talk about sulfites? She's worried about sulfites in the wine.
Okay, all of the Kumala wines will contain sulfite, because we don't make organic wines, and unfortunately you need sulfites as a preservative in your wines. So in the case of the wines we're tasting tonight, they all would contain sulfites. Sulfites, as I said, is a preservative. You can make wine without it, even though it's very difficult. Wines will always have limited traces of sulfites in it because it's used as a spray in the vineyards. So it's possible to do it, but it'll be less detected in the wine. But in wine itself, we use various forms of sulfite. Sulfur dioxide is probably the main one we use across all of the Kumala wines. And some people tend to have kind of an allergic reaction to it because it kind of affects their sinuses. They'll start sneezing, and they'll get short of breath, and that's just a few of the things that would normally happen to people.
Did you say it had gelatin in the wine?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. One of my followers has asked if it had gelatin in the video broken.
Have it in the wine. It was used to make the wine, surely.
Yes, it's used in the wine making process.
Okay.
It doesn't have it in the wine, but it was used as part of the process.
Right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff. Ben, do you want to take us on to our final wine of the evening?
Okay, the last wine is a Kumala Reserve Shiraz. Now, most of the Kumala blends would be wines that we buy from different regions within the Western Cape and sub-regions and wards where we do various tank selections. And with the Kumala Reserve range, we've gone a little step further. We've gone into regional selection. So with the Kumala Reserve range that we're currently doing in the reds, we're focusing on the Swartland region, which is very well known for its Shiraz. It's predominantly bush vine driven. It's very low yielding grapes or low yielding vines where the grapes are selected from. And when I say bush vines, for people who's unfamiliar with that, you can either get vines on a trellis, which means it's basically on a wire off the ground, or you can get vines that's grown, it looks like a bush that's growing off the ground. And what makes these vines so unique is you get very low yields on it. So normally on Shiraz you would get, for Kumala you're looking at 15 to 25 tons per hectare. On the Kumala Reserve range, with the bush vines you're looking 5, maybe if you're lucky 8 to 10 tons a hectare. So you're looking at very, very low yields. Now with low yields comes huge concentration, it comes a lot more mouthfeel, more color intensity. The grapes are more organically grown, if you want to call it that. And the grapes are also much more shielded and protected. It's kind of grown in this little bush as opposed to the canopy slightly more exposed.
I've noticed the alcohol content is higher on this one as well. It's 14%. Yes,
and it's much, much higher as well. With the Shiraz, we normally we kind of pick it at about 15.5% alcohol. So that would be the potential alcohol that you start with, and then we go through a very vigorous selection process where we've got various batches of Shiraz. Some would be at 15, some would be at 15.5, some would be at 14, 14.5, all coming from the Swartland region, and then we just kind of play around. And if we feel that the high alcohol wines are too porty, we would normally take it through a alcohol reduction, where we take a little bit of the alcohol to retain the fruit. And then we also, as I said, with Kumala, we use a lot of oak chips. With the Kumala Reserve range, we focus a lot more on staves. And we do extensive trials on the Reserve range as well. So once we've selected our vineyard blocks, the wine's been made, we taste the wines, we select the tanks that we want, and then we do a very extensive oak trial program, or oak trial with specifically staves on all of the tanks we've selected. And then based on what we select there, we'll go into it. So for this particular one, we used about 50% American oak, and we also used about 50% French oak. And it's, again, different toastings that we've used on both of these staves.
I have a question about decanting. So I'm just going to bring it over now. I have a beautiful decanter that was given to me, but this has port in it at the moment. But would you recommend that people decant their wine before they drink it, or is it fine to just open the bottle and, you know, and pour into a glass?
Most of the Kumala wines are made on a ready-to-drink basis, which means it's pretty much ready to go. When you start moving into the Kumala Reserve range, yes, I definitely recommend that you decant to the reds. And the reason why people decant it is to basically expose it to oxygen, especially if you've got wines that's been sitting in oak barrels, that's been oak matured for a few months, or in some cases even a few years. Once you open the bottle, the tannins are quite tight and closed, and it needs to be exposed to oxygen, but not huge amount of oxygen. It's got to be a kind of a delicate introduction of oxygen into the wine, which basically just kind of help the wine to open up and brings out its true aromatics and flavors.
The thin neck.
Sorry?
Hence the thin neck on these, for those small amount of oxygen.
So it's got to be a very gentle process. I mean, don't shake it up.
Yeah.
Ben,
We had. Oh.
sorry. Ben, can I ask a controversial question?
Yes?
You said this wine was Swartland. It says that on the front label. The back label says Western Cape. But how do we know? There's no wine of origin on it. There's no wine and spirits sticker on the neck. How do we actually know where the wine comes from? There's no on the neck, no guarantee of origin. The front just says Swartland, but the back label just says wine of Western Cape.
Yeah. Look, it's one of those things that this wine gets shipped in bulk. So we ship it in bulk to the UK, and then it gets bottled in the UK, and labels are printed in the UK as well. So when wine gets shipped, the certification process becomes a little bit more tricky, because traceability's got to go over from South Africa into the UK. So this was one of the first runs we've done. The second run we've perfected. The first run we had the wine of origin on the front label. On the back label was wine of origin Western Cape. The second batch we picked it up and we corrected it. So both has got Swartland front and back now. So it's just something that came. Unfortunately, you guys got the first of the lot. The wine is still the same for the first and the second batch. It's just the labeling. It was a bit of a challenge at our bottling facility, but we corrected that.
Do you do any South African bottled wines, or are they all bulk shipped?
It depends on the season, because of the size of our business, we would normally in South Africa we've got a 2 to 3 week lead time on bulk wine. So when our bottling facility in Bristol say to us, listen, we need to switch South Africa out and make place for the Australians or third party. So a third party was to come in and use our bottling facility, they would normally push out South Africa because we can swing back to bottling in South Africa very quickly. So every 6 months, you'll see a turnaround. So for 6 months, we'll ship about 80% of our wines in bulk, and then 6 months later, we'll switch it back to South Africa and bottle in SA. It all depends on what our bottling facility can handle, what they want to do. But because shipping time to the UK from South Africa is about 2.5 weeks, and we can produce wine within 2 to 3 weeks, we're very flexible in that sense. So it's pretty much what our bottling facility wants. We just go with them.
And does that shipping, the difference in time, does that is it reflected in the price in the offers that are put on in the supermarkets and things?
No. That's pretty much set in stone. That deal is done before the wine ships. So whether it ships in bulk or bottle, it makes no difference to the promotional mechanic.
What's the price of reserve versus just an ordinary Pinotage?
Yes, I have the same question as well about the reserve. Sorry, question.
So I didn't get the first part of the question. What was the first part?
I was wondering what the price difference is. Like, how much does it go up in price if you want reserve versus sort of standard?
Okay. Are you talking now about the price of the bottle or the wine in the bottle? Are you talking about
the price of the bottle if you were to buy it in a supermarket, basically? Like, what should you look to pay?
The Kumala Reserve is normally at $8.99 and then a third of $5.99, whereas the Kumala deals that we do, the Pinotage Shiraz, would normally be a $7.99 down to $7.49, $6.99.
What does reserve mean?
Reserve is just a different selection process. So it's the best of the lot that we can pick. The reserve will always be regional as well. So we probably want to change it at some point to reserve regional or regional reserves rather than just reserve, and just give it a little bit more provenance.
Thank you.
I think we've got around time for one more question, just on this one, just before we wrap up. So, is there anyone who wants to have the last question?
Well, Stuart,
I have. Oh.
Or we can have both of you. We can have both of you.
No.
Liliana, if you go first, and then Peter.
No, what I was going to say to Ben is lots and lots of questions. There are like 50 so questions about pairing wine and food. So instead of going through them, perhaps it's easy if I give you the link to my blog and you can see them and give those. That's it. That's my request. Thank you.
Stuart asked me to ask you, what was the 2014 vintage like?
It was a massive vintage.
Massive in good or massive as in?
Massive as in massive as in the volume that was produced this year. But it was also a very challenging vintage in the sense that we had some rain in the beginning of the vintage, which led to quite a lot of rot on the early white varieties. They got affected by it, so there's some, but this was very much isolated to certain regions rather than the whole wine region wasn't affected. It was more kind of sub-regions within the Western Cape that got affected by it. The nice thing with Kumala is that we are not restricted to specific regions. So if one region gets affected by rot, we can buy our wine and our grapes from a different region that was not affected by it. So that was one thing that stood out. And then also, another thing for this particular vintage that was quite challenging is that because of the rain we had and because of the extent of the season, because it was quite a stretched out season that was interrupted with quite a bit of rain and cold weather, some of the early red wines like Merlot and in some cases Pinotage didn't get the color intensity that we had hoped for this specific vintage. But it was a big vintage in terms of size. I think the grape varieties that stood out in this particular vintage would be Sauvignon Blanc, really stood out. The Shiraz, if you managed to get your Shiraz in before it got got nailed by rot, stands out. And then I would probably say in some areas Chenin Blanc as well. The ones that again didn't get affected by the early rains in the beginning of the season.
Thank you.
Great. So I'm afraid to say that's actually all we've got time for tonight's live broadcast. I am sorry. Thanks to everyone who's participated and joined in. Each of you just want to say a little goodbye, and again, maybe just if any of you want to talk about just sort of again, just a quick mention of your blog or Twitter handle. Start with Peter.
Okay, I'm simple. Pinotage.org.
We like that simplicity. And Lucy?
My blog is Lucy Loves, which is Lucie loves.co.uk, and I've just put a post up now to the Kumala tasting for October 2014, so you'll be able to rewatch this all over again.
Wow.
I know what I'll be doing when I get home. And Liliana.
Imagine.
My blog is Lilia Angel, which is LILINHAangel.com, and on Twitter is Lilia World, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And lastly, many, many thanks to the host with the most, Mr. Ben Jordaan. Thank you very much.
Ben.
Thanks, guys. This was fun. This was challenging, but this was fun.
I'm looking at you, Peter. I am. No, but thanks to everyone who's been involved and those watching at home.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks to everyone. Look forward to seeing you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.